I was just recently at the Royal Ontario Museum in Toronto, Ontario, Canada, and I was walking through these massive galleries that contain fossils, pottery, tools, jewelry, bones, you name it. The whole story of humanity that was laid out in front of me. And these beautifully curated sections, included paleontology, ancient civilizations, cultural artifacts. They just didn't seem like they were ever going to end. It was enormous. And as I moved room to room, I kept thinking to myself that same thing. This is a lot of stuff. Every display felt like a different chapter of our shared human story, but after a while, something unexpected happened. I got a little numb to it. Now, not because the artifacts weren't meaningful. It's an amazing museum. I would do it again and again. But I became numb because there were so many artifacts. It was like an attic filled with stuff. And depending on the day, your brain might be too tired to unpack what is there. And this was like my third touristy thing that I had done, thousands of walking steps, train rides that I did that day. So my brain was getting tired. In the end, I think I just needed some human connection. And then it hit me. Museums preserve history, but we musicians, we bring it to life. Hi, everybody. My name's Jeff Price, and I'd like to welcome you back to Intentional Musicianship, where we talk about everything that happens at center stage and everything that goes into crafting performances that truly connect. We look at performance practice, storytelling, showmanship, and audience engagement so that we can be more intentional, deliberate, and focused in our musical moments over there at center stage. So today, we're talking about something I realized in that museum. And it isn't that movie Hot Tub Time Machine, but it's close. It's not Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure, but it's close. I'm going to say music is the ultimate time machine. And you, as the musician, are the ones operating it. So let's dive in. So what I learned in the museum is that everything is still. It's quiet, frozen behind glass. But when you step onto a stage and perform a piece, whether it's written 100, 300 years ago, or hey, it could be even within the last 5 years, and you're not preserving history, you're reanimating it, you're continuing it, you're breathing life into it, you're giving it motion, you're turning this fossil, this artifact, into a real experience. Now, these museums let us look at history, and it was really cool because I got to see all the school kids coming through on the buses, and they got to see these things for the first time. But I'll let you know something really cool. Music lets you feel it. There is no display case that can duplicate what we hear orally when we listen to Mozart or Debussy or Duke Ellington, especially when we play and we perform with great intention, these communication skills that we've developed with our voice, our instrument. And that's that time travel thing, and you're that guide. Now, I always give some sort of professor disclaimer. I know I was one. So here's my disclaimer. Your professor's going to tell you have to play a piece of music a certain way. Play the articulation a certain way to be correct. The ornament must go here and be done just so. And this is how they did it back then in the day. And, they're right. Performance practice matters. History matters. Knowing that style matters. Hey, I took that class at Northwestern too. And here's the truth that doesn't get said enough. When you're the one on stage, you decide what to perform, how to perform, and how to do it. Not your professor, not the textbook, not a dusty 18th century treatise, only you. So here's my real world advice when you're approaching these older pieces of music and things. Research the origins, understand the style, and then make some informed decisions. In the end, then you have to be yourself. But remember, every choice has consequences. But if your intention is to connect with your audience and to communicate clearly and to tell a story, that's going to end up being a win for everybody. And if something just doesn't land quite right, or if your professor comes up and says, oh my gosh, that ornament, we need to fix that next time we have a lesson. Well, that's really not something you're going to be concerned about unless you're in a competition to do that particular thing. Introduce that concept, hit that teachable moment, then move on, we as humans in the audience, we're going to be appreciative that you're sharing. There's no need to dwell on that minutia that really in the end doesn't give bang for the buck. So don't dwell on some of these older historical practices that might not land with your audiences, so to speak. So when I talk about music as real time travel, so to speak, we can say that museums show us where we came from, and music lets us enter where we came from. So if we play a Bach or a Brahms or a Mozart, Debussy going modern with Duke Ellington, or maybe in a folk song that predates electricity, you're creating a conversation between times, centuries. Your breath becomes that composer's voice. Can you imagine them just sort of looking back and say, oh my gosh, someone's still playing my music? That's pretty cool. Your phrasing becomes their message. That's really cool. That's probably better than I even envisioned writing it. Your performance becomes that bridge. You're bringing that person, that composer, that music alive again. For that moment, history is alive. And that's sort of what makes us that ultimate time machine. So one of the easiest ways to bring history to life that is different than, say, a museum is to simply to remind your audience that composers were real human beings, just like you. They had real lives. They weren't marble busts that I saw at the Royal Ontario Museum. They weren't textbook names. So find a story, learn about that person, and share. So I always loved Clara Wick Schumann. And she was a piano player, also a composer, but she was a child prodigy. And you think about that era, about women being amazing performers and composers and the restrictions that she had and what she had to overcome. So you think about this, she married into this musical life. She raised 8 children. She had an amazing, super big concert career that still impacts us today, especially like memorization. She became a respected teacher. So a musician, mother, educator. She had a pretty full, complicated life with Robert Schumann. We might bring up Johannes Brahms. We might say that he once said he destroyed 20 string quartets before publishing his first 20. And he spent over 2 decades on that first symphony. He was a perfectionist. He had the same mental hang-ups as everybody else has that can make that music relatable and understandable. I think of Claude Debussy. He accepted money from Elisa Hall to write this saxophone piece called Rhapsody. Then he waited years to actually deliver. He barely knew the saxophone. Hey, the orchestration was finished after his death. Even when she wrote him, I remember him saying, La femme saxophone, she's coming. What am I going to do? He has to write something. So even these masters had to deal with money issues, deadlines, unfamiliar instruments. They had to adult. They had a lot of stuff to deal with. And these human stories aren't just trivia, they're connectors, and they can show your audience and let the people in about the people who wrote these pieces. And, in the end, history repeats itself. We're just like them. So here are a few ways that we can bring the past alive for our audiences. The first is to share that one human story. Now, this isn't a whole lecture, just a small human moment like what we just talked about. It just opens that emotional doorway and lets people in. We're people. We like music. We like communication. We like talking. We like the atmosphere. We set the scene, so to speak. Our second tip is going to what I said about not letting the professor say you have to do something a certain way. We're going to use those modern sensibilities be our bridge to the past. And of course, we do have that disclaimer up at the beginning, try to do your best, all that stuff. But rubato, dynamics, color, pacing, these aren't wrong. They help today's listener and our ears understand yesterday's language. You're not recreating the past, you're sort of translating it. And, I'm thinking like the Bible, and there's all these translations of the Bible. And nowadays we have all these things to make it easier to understand. Well, we could do the same thing with our music translations, so to speak. We don't have to play it just so. We can try to play it in a way that impacts someone in a more effective way. And my third tip is activate that history by asking yourself, why does this matter today? And this is the heart of it. You activate history by making choices that answer, why does this matter for the people sitting in the front row next to me? Not why it mattered in Vienna in 1804, why it matters tonight. Why are you revisiting this work? So again, we're shaping phrases, we're choosing tempo, we're crafting a moment with today's audience in mind. You bring the past into the present. You see, these museums, they preserve the history. We musicians activate it. And the moment you make the music relevant, the audience leans in. Maybe this just means we do a little bit of judicious editing to make it more understandable for our audience. We don't do it a way that needed to be done back way in the day. So I'm thinking that if you're a teacher or you're with your group, you're always teaching and letting people know why you're doing these things. But we do this with the audience too. So if you're leading an ensemble, whether it be a band, an orchestra, a jazz group, chamber ensemble, maybe it's a solo recital, you always have an opportunity to give the audience a quick, powerful teaching moment. Again, not a lecture, unless it's a lecture recital. Just a sound bite, a small musical demonstration that shows where the piece came from and why it still matters. So here are some examples of what you can do. You do this already as you're teaching the piece to your students, but you do this for the audience to get them engaged and to get them to understand what they're listening to. Let's say you were going to have a truly authentic performance. You might want to explain what they're going to hear and why it's different. So for a band or orchestra piece, you can say, hey, this rhythm comes from a Renaissance dance, and then you can play a little bit of it. For a chamber ensemble, you can say, listen to this call and response. Musicians have traded ideas like this for centuries, and then you can have two players in the ensemble trade those little motifs. As a soloist, you can say, here's the harmonic pattern that the whole piece is built on. It appears across hundreds of works, and in particular, this piece I'm going to play tonight, and then you can sort of demonstrate that. For a jazz ensemble, I love using a vamp, and you can show how the groove is developed. So for example, something like boogie woogie, stride piano, early rock and roll, even video game music has that same kind of bass line. And we can have maybe the piano player play that, so we can sort of see the development of that and how it's used in different things. So in the end, we have one moment, one connection, and then we move along. We open the door, and then that audience is ready to hear the piece in a different manner, a more open manner. So as we close, standing in that Royal Ontario Museum reminded me of something important that I've said multiple times. Museums preserve our past. Musicians bring our past to life. So every time you step on stage, you're not just performing, you're connecting with people across time. You're giving meaning to moments that were written sometimes centuries ago. And you're helping audiences feel something human, something timeless. Thanks for listening today. You can always join us at intentionalmusicianship.com. I would truly love to hear from each and every one of you. Your stories and experiences are what keep me going and what helps inspire some future episodes that we have planned. I hope you'll continue to join us on the next episode of Intentional Musicianship in around 2 weeks.